Good day, friends. I'm Kerry Dillinger. This is Bible Class Topics, and today we want to talk about the time the Apostle Paul came to Athens in Acts 17, verses 16 through 34. After being rushed away from another city, Paul found himself in Athens with some time on his hands as he waited for Timothy and Silas to join him. What he witnessed in Athens caused his spirit to be provoked within him when he saw that the city was given over to idols, Acts 17:16. So, as was his custom, he spoke in the synagogue and the busy marketplace about the true God, and this drew the attention of the local philosophers. Paul did not impress them with what he was saying, but they wanted to hear more and brought him before the Areopagus. And before the Areopagus, he preached the new doctrine, Acts 17:19, and the new doctrine, of course, was Jesus is the Savior, the Son of God, resurrected from the dead, verse 18. We want to take a further look at how Paul makes the unknown God known to the men of Athens, and we're going to turn for some help to the Thomas Nelson Chronological Study Bible of the New King James Version. We'll say more about chronological Bibles and study Bibles in general at the conclusion of today's lesson. Stoics, Epicureans, and a babbler. Acts 17 through 21. Therefore, he, that is Paul, reasoned in the synagogue with the Jews and with the Gentile worshippers, and in the marketplace with those who happened to be there. Then certain Epicurean and Stoic philosophers encountered him, and some said, "What does this babbler want to say?" Others said, "He seems to be a proclaimer of foreign gods because he preached to them Jesus and the resurrection." And they took him and brought him to the Areopagus, saying, "May we know what this new doctrine is of which you speak, for you are bringing some strange things to our ears. Therefore, we want to know what these things mean." For all the Athenians and the foreigners who were there spent their time in nothing else but either to tell or to hear some new thing. What about these Epicureans? Well, Epicureans held little influence in Athens in this day and time, outside of the academic elite. They were dismissed, or they, I should say, dismissed the popular Greek notion about the pantheon of gods. If deities exist, they said, one could know them only in terms of physical phenomena like the stars or the planets. In the Epicurean philosophy, the supreme goal was pleasure, and they defined pleasure especially as the absence of pain. By contrast, the more popular Stoics opposed pleasure, criticized the Epicureans, and usually professed belief in the gods. Nevertheless, the Stoics had interpretation of the gods that differed from some of the ordinary Greek people of the time. Sometimes the Stoic focused on the supreme deity, whom they saw as ruling and permeating the universe. Paul would have a hard time simultaneously appealing to both of these groups as he addressed them at the Areopagus. All of what he had to say, of course, fits Christian theology, and some of what he had to say even fit the Stoic teaching, Acts 17:22 through 29. He presented distinctive Christian theology only after he had won his audience's ear, we'll see in verse 30 and 31. Paul insists we can know the unknown God only in his Son, Jesus Christ. In 399 BC, 400 years before the time of Paul, the Council of the Areopagus had accused Socrates of introducing new gods. So with the charge against Paul of proclaiming foreign gods, verse 18, the Athenians were treating him as they had treated their most famous thinker. Such a charge had once been a capital offense in Athens, and there's evidence that they had stoned to death a priestess for the very same crime. Paul is considered to be a babbler. That's what the intellectual critics called him. In Greek, the term initially referred to birds pecking up grain, but by Paul's time it meant worthless persons, perhaps somewhat like the traditional North American insult, bird brain. Yet this babbler's sermon was not a failure, and it did result in new believers, including the influential Dionysius. See verse 33 and 34. The unknown God now became known. A tradition is passed down from Eusebius and reports that Dionysius the Areopagite became the first Christian bishop of Athens, but of course that's human history, not found in our inspired Bible. Let's talk about geography and the environment, and we'll do that by first reading Acts 17 verses 22 through 28. I'm reading from the ESV. Then Paul stood in the midst of the Areopagus and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God. Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing, him I proclaim to you, God, who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands. Nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he need anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us, for in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Acts 17, 22 through 28. Paul spoke about the unknown God at the Areopagus, whose name was associated with Ares, the Greek god of war, sometimes known as Mars. In Greek, the term Areopagus means Hill of Ares, or, as we sometimes call it, Mars Hill. It is the name of a hill below the Acropolis in Athens, and the traditional law court of Athens, which once met on or near the hill. So, the Areopagus was a place, and it was also a council of lawmakers. A little farther from the Areopagus, a little farther from the Acropolis, and below the Areopagus was the Agora, Agora, the city marketplace. Paul comes before the Areopagus. He came to Mars Hill and he spoke to this council. Let's read verses 32 through 34 of Acts 17. And when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked, while others said, We will hear you again on this matter. So Paul departed from among them. However, some men joined him and believed, among them Dionysius the Areopagite, a woman named Damaris, and others with him. In AD 50, Paul visited Athens and began preaching in the Agora. This marketplace in ancient Greece served as the center of public life. Then the Athenians summoned Paul to the Areopagus, where he preached his sermon about the unknown God. The purpose of his visit to the Areopagus and its council is not specific, but he may have been on trial to defend his beliefs. We know of one individual from the Areopagus council, namely Dionysius, who became convinced of the truthfulness of Paul's message and obeyed the gospel of Christ. The Areopagus was a prominent hill in Athens. It was nearly 400 feet high. It sat below the Acropolis but above the Agora, and it still does to this day. Although ancient references to the council of the Areopagus are few, it is evident that it was an aristocratic body that advised the king. It then assumed royal functions after the Athenians deposed their monarchy, sometime before 800 BC. With the rise of democracy in 500 BC, the council lost some of its power and became essentially an esteemed group with religious functions. By the time the 1st century AD rolled around, the Council of the Areopagus had regained much of its former authority. The assembly to which Paul preached was again the chief governing body in Athens, a position it would keep until the advent of Christian domination in the 4th century AD. Thank you for studying with me today. I hope these notes from the Chronological Study Bible by Thomas Nelson will be helpful to you in your own personal study. How do you feel about a chronological Bible? I think that the next time I sit down to read through the Bible in one go, and by in one go I mean daily until I finish, I think I will choose a chronological Bible. But what about a study Bible? Do you have a study Bible that you use that you think is worthy? I'd love for you to put the name of that Bible in the comments below so that I might look into it for my own personal study. Remember, we're not selling books on this channel. We talk about books, but the only book that is reliable day in, day out, and for all time is the Bible. Painting today, taken from the public domain. It's by Raphael, and it portrays Paul speaking in front of the Areopagus. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share. That would be greatly appreciated if you haven't already. Let's plan on studying together again real soon, Lord willing. Until then, may God bless.